Hello, welcome to my channel. Food for HNM. It's like food for thought. This is a channel where we talk about all things Holy Bible. I once thought that there's a Bible verse. My peeps perish for the lack of knowledge. Did you know that a long time ago in the United States, on the East Coast, when there were no schools yet, the church would double as a school, and they had no books. No books. So they used the Bible to teach people. So I am your Holy Bible explainer. Joshua 4. You will remember that I don't know when the last time you watched the prior video was, but the Israelites, after leaving Egypt at the Exodus, many people left Egypt. God freed them from the Pharaoh with a mighty hand. There were these plagues. He just struck Egypt with all these plagues, and then Pharaoh gave up. He's like, I surrender. Okay, you guys can leave. And now the Israelites, after traveling through the desert for many years, they are now ready to go into the land promised them by God. But they have to fight. They have to possess the land, fight for it, and they have to dispossess. They have to dislodge and probably wipe them all out, all the people that are there. So Joshua 4 again, when the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan. Remember, God made the river stand up in a heap so that where there was the river, there was dry ground. The river bed was completely dry, and all the people could cross the river walking. They didn't have to take boats. When they finished crossing, the Lord said to Yehoshua, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, 12 tribes, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing. So, remember, the priests are standing with the Ark of the Covenant, while all the people walk by them. They're standing there. It is like the Ark of the Covenant is like God's presence, and they can visibly see, that is by God's power, that river is just standing right there in a heap, and the people are just walking, crossing the river bed, walking on dry ground. But right there must have been 12 big stones right next to where the priests were standing. So carry them over with you and put them down at the place where you stay tonight. So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulders. So these are big stones, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you in the future when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the river Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. So the Israelites did as Joshua, Yehoshua, the general, the leader of all the people and the army, commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord had told Joshua, Yehoshua, and they carried them over with them to their camp, where they put them down. Joshua, Yehoshua set up the 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan, at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. Now the priests who carried the ark remained standing. Pardon me. It's very exciting. It's very exciting. Okay, verse 10. Now the priests who carried the ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything the Lord had commanded Joshua was done by the people, just as Moses had directed Joshua, Yehoshua. The people hurried over, and as soon as all of them had crossed the ark of the Lord, and the priests came to the other side while the people watched, the men of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over, ready for battle, in front of the Israelites, as Moses had directed them. About 40,000, armed for battle, crossed over before the Lord to the plains of Jericho for war. So Jericho is a city that they're going to attack. That day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him all the days of his life, just as they had stood in awe of Moses. Then the Lord said to Joshua, Yehoshua, command the priests carrying the ark of the covenant law to come up out of the Jordan. So Joshua, Yehoshua, commanded the priests, come up out of the Jordan. And the priests came up out of the river, carrying the ark of the covenant of the Lord. No sooner had they set their feet on the dry ground than the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and ran at flood stage as before. So as soon as the priests, all the people crossed, and the priests are the last. As soon as the priests crossed, then the river that was standing up, it just boom, went back to where it was. Verse 19, on the 10th day of the first month, the people went up from the Jordan and camped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. And Joshua, Yehoshua, set up at Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken out of the Jordan. He said to the Israelites, in the future, when your descendants ask their parents, what do these stones mean? So let's use a comparison. I think some of you live in America or have visited America. So you have to imagine Yehoshua set up 12 stones. So here we have, what do we have? Like, we might have, okay, we have forests, we have like national parks, and we have the Grand Canyon. And, well, let's use the Grand Canyon as an example. You know, sometimes you look at it, if you've been there, and it's just breathtaking. But what does it mean? You know, it means there were rivers there at one time that dried up. Rivers that carved out all of those canyons and valleys. So that's what, you know, let's say time passed from this point where we're reading, and people ask, or children ask, what are these 12 stones? You know, there's a story behind it. Tell them, Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground, for the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he had done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us until we had crossed over. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God. Let's go on to Joshua 5. Joshua 5. Now when all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan and all the Canaanite kings along the coast heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan. Remember, they came in from the east of the Jordan. So the Lord had dried up the Jordan before the Israelites until they had crossed over. These kings, their hearts melted in fear, and they no longer had the courage to face the Israelites. So these are kings of places, of nations, maybe with many cities in them, that the Israelites are all going to fight. The Israelites are going to fight all of them. The next section is titled Circumcision. Circumcision and Passover at Gilgal. At that time, the Lord said to Yehoshua, make flint knives. Those are knives made of stone or rocks, and circumcise the Israelites again. So Yehoshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelites at Gibeath Ha'araloth. Sounds like, if you watch Star Wars, you know, there's Hoth, and there's other places, like Tatooine, you know, sounds similar. Gibeath Ha'araloth. Now, this is why he did so. This is why Yehoshua had to circumcise the Israelites. All those who came out of Egypt, all the men of military age, died in the wilderness on the way after leaving Egypt. All the people that came out had been circumcised but all the people born in the wilderness during the journey from Egypt had not. So they had not had a procedure, the extra skin of the penis. They had not had that cut off. The Israelites had moved about in the wilderness 40 years until all the men who were of military age when they left Egypt had died, since they had not obeyed the Lord. For the Lord had sworn to them that they would not see the land. He had solemnly promised their ancestors to give us a land flowing with milk and honey. So he raised up their sons in their place, and these were the ones Yehoshua circumcised. They were still uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised on the way. Oh, okay. They did not circumcise themselves. So you have to get a flu shot. And after the whole nation had been circumcised, they remained where they were in camp until they were healed. So Joshua had to circumcise thousands of men. You could just call them Rabbi Joshua or Dr. Joshua. Spoiler alert, or actually you have to watch an earlier video. The Israelites, but not all of them. This group is a very large group. They are descended from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Remember, Moses has died. Yehoshua succeeded Moses. Moses is known for having the Ten Commandments, and he had a covenant. He's called the covenant giver, or he mediated, he spoke to God, and God, through Moses or with Moses, created a covenant, something like a contract with the Israelites. But Abraham, the first dude of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they're not a singing group. They were very mighty people of faith who listened to God. Abraham spoke to God often, and God told Abraham, I will give you a son, and from you will come a nation and kings. You'll have so many descendants, like the stars, or like the dust, the number of dusts, dust on the ground. But you must be different from other people, not like the people where I am going to send you to live, to take the land. It's like, I want you to be the way you are. Abraham, you are blameless before me. And you must now cut off the extra skin of your penis. Is called circumcision. You and all your descendants must chop it off. And that was a covenant that there are other details, but not a lot of people know that God had a covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and their descendants, who are the Israelites. So Joshua is not crazy. He remembers that they have to be circumcised. It goes way back to Abraham and his covenant. I mentioned it. So then the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." So the place has been called Gilgal to this day. That's kind of important. So now they have entered the land. The reproach of Egypt. Let's look up the word reproach. Reproach in Google. Means to express criticism or disappointment or accuse someone of a fault. So I think that there's something about Egypt in the past. Egypt's great now. They have a cool canal, and you can see all these pyramids. The food's not bad. It's pretty good, I hear. But back then, perhaps it was not a nice place. Some places were known for wickedness, being used in the biblical sense of the word. But perhaps they were unfair, they were weird, they were just, like, you couldn't talk to them. They seemed inhuman, or they were, you might have heard they enslaved people. So the Israelites, they lived there at one point. So sometimes, if you lived somewhere, someone might wonder, are you like the people there? So after spending 40 years, 40, in the desert, they can safely say that they have changed, Although the Israelites stayed for some time in Egypt, when you visibly look at them, and maybe, I'm talking about at this point in the story, they don't seem like Egyptians. You could tell if someone's from the West Coast, or Texas, or from the East Coast. If they're from like Boston, you know they're from Boston. So let's continue. On the evening of the 14th day of the month, while camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated the Passover. That's a festival. The day after the Passover, that very day, they ate some of the produce of the land, unleavened bread, and roasted grain. The manna, which was bread from heaven, you have to watch earlier videos. So while they were going through the desert to get to this destination, God himself made a certain type of bread rain down from heaven. And they gathered enough for the day, and they ate that. And I heard it was delicious. There was no longer any manna. I mean, I read that it was delicious. It looked like coriander seed, and you have to watch the earlier video. So the manna stopped falling from the sky, but that year they ate the produce of Canaan. The next section is called the fall of Jericho. Now when Yehoshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword, in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied, "but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." Then Yehoshua, fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. This person is a Kadosh Malakim in human form. If you watch my earlier videos, remember, God is leading this group, right? He's talking to Joshua, and Joshua's leading this group. But God is invisible and very hard to perceive, But he called them they're like these angels of the Lord and angels of God. And they appeared as a pillar of cloud, a pillar of fire. I'm not saying for certain, but perhaps the pillar of cloud took human form and became this commander that appeared before Joshua. That's why he knelt down before him. So the Lord is Jesus. He's the creator of everything, the creator God. He said in an earlier book that I want you to follow my commands so you will be successful. So he wants to succeed in taking Jericho with Joshua as the general. So perhaps the Lord sent this commander of the army of the Lord. He's the Kadosh. He could be either the pillar of cloud, or the pillar of fire. Let's keep going. Joshua 6. So they're getting ready to attack. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out, and no one came in. So securely barred is like there's a 2x4 behind the door, horizontally. There might be two of them, two 2x4s. Just so the door cannot be opened. But if you watch movies from a long time ago, like the Lord of the Ring movies, Sometimes armies would use a battering ram to like completely smash the door open. So then the Lord said to Joshua, Yehoshua, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up, everyone straight in. So Yehoshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it. And he ordered the army, advance, march around the city with an armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord. When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. So there are 7 priests with trumpets. And remember, the ark of the Lord's covenant has people carrying it on their shoulders. The armed guard marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. All this time, the trumpets were sounding. But Yehoshua, had commanded the army, do not give a war cry. Do not raise your voices. Do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. So, he told them to, be very quiet. Because, normally, when you're going to fight, if you see in other movies, there could be a city, and then they have a wall. It's usually like 30 feet high. There are people standing on top of the wall, and then the army rolls up, right? It comes up, and they just like right here, and then they're like yell at those guys, and they usually camp here. And of course, it can be noisy because they're going to kill people. So some people are and maybe some of them are drunk, but there are thousands and 10,000s of soldiers in this army, and Joshua tells them, very quiet, very quiet. So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. So it must have been kind of spooky. The army of Jericho, they have a wall. So they're standing on top of their wall, and they're looking at the Israelites' army, and they're like really quiet. And then they have this, what is it? They have a bunch of priests, and there's like Marines in the front and Marines in the back, armed guard. And they just blow horns, and they're really quiet. And what are they doing? Okay, they're just going around. Here they come. An hour later. Oh, okay. Or 2. Hour or 2 later. Okay. They went around our city. Okay. So Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord again. The 7 priests, carrying the 7 trumpets, went forward. marching before the ark of the Lord and blowing the trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord, while the trumpets kept sounding. So on the second day, they marched around the city once. So every day they marched around it once. I said 2 hours, but it might have taken longer than 2 hours. Those priests, it must be strong, carrying this ark of the Lord, heavy. So they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. So they did this for 6 days. So you have to imagine the Jericho army, their commanders are looking down from the wall. And, okay, they're all there and they're really quiet. And, okay, here they go. They're marching around their city. These, the armed guard and 7 priests and those guys carrying the ark. Those are priests too. And then, okay, they got the rear guard. Oh, there they go. A few hours later, okay, here they come. And the Israelites and their army are really quiet. So they did that 6 times. They did this for 6 days. On the 7th day, remember, this is God, the Creator, the Lord, His strategy. He told Joshua, Yehoshua, to do this. Do it in this way. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city, this time 7 times, in the same manner, except that on that day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priests sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua, Yehoshua, commanded the army, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord." That means completely destroyed. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. But keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. All the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into his treasury. When the trumpets sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So the army just shouted, like, "Rah!" It must have been extremely loud. Now, I've never seen that before. Every soldier could shout quite loudly, but thousands of people going, "Rah!" And what happened? Remember, I was talking about the city and the wall, and their commanders are singing the wall, and the army rolls up and they yell at the commanders. This is the wall to the city. In the past, there was a wall going all the way around the city, protecting the city. So that wall just tumbled down, collapsed, and then they all charged in. So remember, usually if you watch war movies, they try to break down the door, or they have ladders, right? And they try to climb a ladder and climb over the wall, or they catapult things to break the wall apart, or they catapult it farther to smash people, on the other side of the wall, or they even shoot arrows. They shoot arrows at people on the wall, because when you climb the wall, they'll just throw something at you or chop at you. So they're trying to kill people on the wall. But what happened here is the entire wall just crumbled, and there's a hole in the wall. or I don't know, a lot of the a lot of the wall around the city just collapsed. So it's possible, because we're talking about the Lord, God. A lot of the wall all around the city, because didn't he say go around the city, right? So wouldn't it be wacky if, okay, here's a city, right, and there's usually a wall around it? It'd be really wacky if, like, so much of the wall around the city just, and then it's like a naked person. There's a city wall, and just boom, and then they all charged it. What happened? So they charged it, they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord. I think because that was the first city, and the Lord is with a mighty hand guiding them and making things that are physically impossible happen. So that first kill, so to speak, belongs to the Lord. He wants those things destroyed, and he wants those valuable things. You have to offer it to him, because he is God. So they ran into the city, and with their swords killed every living thing, male and female, and killed men and women, young and old. Come here, old guy. Pow! And then killed the cattle, beef, and sheep and donkeys. Just killed them all. And then Joshua said to the two men who had spied out the land, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring her out, and all who belong to her, in accordance with your oath to her." So the young men who had done the spying went in and brought out Rahab, her father and mother, her brothers and sisters, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her entire family and put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. So they made sure she and her family would not get hurt. Then they burned the whole city, set it on fire, and everything in it. But they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. But Yehoshua spared Rahab, the prostitute, with her family and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men. Yehoshua had sent spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. At that time, Yehoshua pronounced this solemn oath: "Cursed before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild this city Jericho." So, holy God, the Lord. I'm not certain, but if he wanted that city destroyed that badly, by the sword, not by hailstones or sulfur, burning sulfur, then Joshua is being prophetic, a prophet. He's saying that this city will never be rebuilt because it is not the Lord's will. At the cost of his firstborn son, he will lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest, he will set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua. He said the right thing. Yehoshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. Thank you for listening. That was Joshua. The book of Joshua, chapters 4, 5, and 6. Remember, keep God first. He'll take you places.